sort of general rule with wildlife gardening is that for pollinators, it doesn't really matter if it's native or not. Some species are more fussy than others, so some do require native flowers, but most are generalists, and most, nectar is just sugar water, and it's the same regardless of what flower you get it from. Pollen is pollen. It does vary in quality, but that doesn't necessarily equate to its nativeness or its non-nativeness. So as a general rule, you can grow a mixture of natives and non-native flowering plants. But the trees and the shrubs, for the leaf munchers, for the caterpillars, for the aphids, for all of those things, less so aphids, but very much so caterpillars, they need to be native plants.
Hello and welcome to episode 97 of Talking Dirty. Over at East Ruston Old Vicarage, looking totally tangerine, we have Alan Edward Herbert Gray, our happy and very handsome horticulturalist.
It's funny you should say that, because that is the name of a particularly fine dahlia. But then that anyway. And over in Cambridgeshire, we have blooming and beautiful as ever, Thordis Maria Sophia Fredriksson.
Got some tangerine hearts on my jumper, feeling very, very happy because returning, it's been a bit of a wait to get our next guests back. They joined us first back in episode 79, I think. We have Helen Victoria Picton, I seem to remember, named after a water lily, and Ross Barbour, no middle name, but never mind, doesn't matter, of course, the Picton Garden, Old Court Nurseries. Welcome back, you wonderful people. How are you?
Yeah, very well. We're pleased to be back again. Been looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Not as much as us, I can assure you of that. You've had a busy summer, particularly at the Malvern Autumn Show, where I think you picked up a pretty good medal.
Yeah, we did. We were really pleased. We got a gold. We were a bit worried because it was the first year where we'd officially combined succulents and asters together, which was, we weren't sure how this was going to go down with the judges, but I think the succulents probably saved the day, didn't they?
Possibly, yeah. But we had a judge actually visit us the day before who came around the garden and saw that that's actually what we did in the garden, was mix the two up to a certain extent. So that, I think that helped sway the judges again. So, yeah.
It wasn't totally random, honest.
Yeah.
It's a very intriguing mixture, actually, because, you couldn't get two plants that are poles so far apart, really. I think I'd love to see the way you actually mix your succulents with your asters.
They're not physically mixed, but they are all in the garden.
Yeah.
So, but that's what the judges said to us. They said we need to mix them more. So that's put a right conundrum on us for next year. So watch this space.
You've got a year to muddle out combining asters and succulents. Actually, I feel
the cogs are turning.
Before we get stuck into all the specific plants, of course, asters are one of these groups where we all get stuck on the name. So I don't even know if you want to go down the whole Symphyotrichum aster route. Do you want to delve into that at all, or just pretend it doesn't exist?
No, we'll look at it as we go through, because actually, once you can get your mind around the fact that it is a new name, which is not so easy to say as aster, but we won't worry about that. It's quite an easy division. So it's the European ones are very distinctive to the North American.
The awful thing for most people is the fact that you as nursery people and gardeners, and me as a gardener, we can get our heads around it relatively easily. But I think, most people, ordinary folk who come to you to buy a Michaelmas Daisy or an Aster, that's exactly what they want. They don't want to even know about Symphyotrichum.
So that's what they are. They are still asters. They're all still asters, and they're all still Michaelmas Daisies.
Well said, Ross.
That's what we all need to remember.
Well, it's quite handy actually, because all the common names in North America still use aster, so you can sort of work it in without having to get too deep into the name changes and things. So,
yeah, but if you are interested, then you can take it that step further and start dividing them up. So it's quite good.
Well, I'm glad that for this podcast, where we like to get as geeky as possible, you're going to divide them up and explain it for us. So I'm looking forward to that. And your garden, I've only seen it, sadly, on Instagram, but my goodness, it is looking wonderful, as I suppose people would expect at the height of Michaelmas Daisy season, just these hummocks of daisies looking wonderful.
I think we're calling it a vintage year this year. Once in a lifetime.
Well, we hope not.
How did the asters fare during the drought that we had?
Well, actually, surprisingly well. We had to do a little bit of watering for the big group, so the novi-belgii,
Yeah,
because they're replanted every year, so you can only expect so much out of a plant.
exactly. Yeah.
So we did have to do a bit there, but otherwise, I mean, we really didn't do a lot of watering in the garden.
Preparation. Before
Yeah.
the summer came, we did the preparation.
That is the key, preparation. And I mean, it is putting goodness in moisture holding stuff into the soil and mulching after you've planted when the soil is wet.
Yeah.
Again, well said, Ross.
I think I might go quite well in my head.
In many ways, being so dry has benefited the daisies from a flowering point of view. So plenty of sunshine to set a lot of buds, and then it's been relatively kind when they're actually out, because once it starts to turn wet, you start to lose the earlier blooms quite quickly. So it's helped. So yeah, mixed blessing, silver lining to every cloud and all that.
And obviously we want to focus a bit on those, but you guys have also loads of lovely ferns, an amazing array of succulents as well. So all round, obviously I imagine the succulents have been all right. Have you had an okay time with the ferns as well?
Yeah, some of the Ethereums went quite quickly, but they go in the summertime anyway. But some of them, it's almost like we're having a second flush at the moment. The last 6 weeks, it seems to, now it's cooled down and we've got a bit of moisture. A lot of the ferns are reflushing, and the whole garden looks refreshed. It's quite it's almost like a second season, an extra season. I don't know,
because some of our biggest ones, like the Dryopteris wallichiana, just collapsed all together in that, really, when we got like nearly 40 degrees, it said thank you very much, but that's more than enough.
Yeah.
But even that's managed to perk itself back up and go again. So yeah, it's been okay.
All the polypodiums, they've just been sitting waiting for a bit of moisture. So as soon as there's a bit of moisture there at the sort of end of July, beginning of August, they all started popping up and bursting through. So that's them into their season now, which is really exciting.
Yeah,
so that'll take us well into winter.
And people who aren't following you, do follow Helen and Ross, the Picton Garden. It is just every day another plant that you want. It's just FLOMO all the time in every kind of plant family. It could be a tree, it could be a fern, it could be a succulent or a daisy. It just comes relentlessly. Daylilies, you had a big burst of daylilies as well. Yeah,
it's been good.
Yeah, endless.
Right then, I feel like show and tell should commence.
Let me get my bucket. You get my bucket. Ross is going to get my bucket because it's too heavy for me. Been putting too much in it again.
That's what we like to hear. I mean, for anyone listening to the audio version, there are 3 buckets surrounding Helen and Ross, so I'm very, very excited.
Yeah, I'd say just couldn't stop.
I have to say that my pen is poised.
So it only seemed fair to start with the novi-belgii, which are now Symphyotrichum. So they're North American. Symphyotrichum novi-belgii was Aster novi-belgii. And they're where most people concentrated the breeding work. So out of the national collection that we hold, which is 435 different varieties, it probably makes up nearly 300 varieties. So it is where you get the biggest diversity. And it's also where the gentleman who founded our nursery, Marie Ballard, really started off with. That's what he wanted to breed and develop, because they hybridize so readily. So you get the biggest range of colours and shapes and sizes of flowers and all sorts. So I wanted to start off with his first one, which I hope the colour's coming up okay. But this is Beauty of Colwall. So you might not think it's hugely exciting, but that, when it was put into a trial in 1907, was heralded as a real colour breakthrough, like very exciting. And also the first true double aster, which now you look at it and you wouldn't go, oh wow, that's doubled, but technically it is.
Got a bit of a ruffle.
Yeah, the ruffle. And then I thought it only fair that we then had a quick look at what was probably one of his big triumph. So he raised this just before he passed away, but this is Marie Ballard. So you can see how the breeding developed. So this was 1950, I think, that he introduced this one. And you can see with the difference once you go from Beauty of Colwall up to Marie Ballard. And you've got this beautiful clear lavender blue, and then this lovely formal double shape, which lasts for a long time. Eventually it opens to show the eye. It's just starting on this one. So the insects get to go at it as well.
At the moment, it's got that kind of Chinese aster, Callistophus pom-pom thing going on.
Yeah, not quite as big as the Calistephus, but yeah, it's got that sort of look to it, hasn't it?
Yeah. Oh, it's beautiful. It's such a
Yeah,
showstopper.
It is lovely, and they're about well, Beauty of Colwall is very tall, so that can get up to about 5 foot, whereas Marie Ballard's more sort of 3.5, and it was named for his second wife, and she was obviously had a great effect on him because she's one of the few people to have 2 Asters named after her, because the other one is Blandie. And I don't know whether the subtlety of this, she was a Miss Bland before she was married, I should clarify this. Wasn't a comment on her personality. I don't think. I don't know whether this will really show, perhaps compared to them. Do you get that slight creamy tint coming through?
Yeah.
So it's about as close to a yellow Astral Michaelmas Daisy that you're going to get. Ernest Ballard went through a bit of an obsession with wanting to try and breed yellow ones, and he wasn't to know, but a few years after he died in the 1950s, the botanists declared that if it was yellow, it wasn't going to be an Aster anyway, so he would never have succeeded, but he did try. He did lots of crossing with Solidagos, so you get loads of solid Asters and stuff like that coming through. But Blandie does have this real cream tint to the bud, and actually when you've got it in the mixed border, you look at it and you think, that is kind of not quite white. Got that off creamy colour, but very pretty, and then of course opens to a nice white daisy, and again sort of 90 centimeters, 3 footish, so really nice example.
I love how Rob is just ending up with this ever increasing bouquet.
Yeah,
not see me in a minute.
I'm going to hand them all over. We'll just have to keep passing them on down the line, I suppose. I did just, before we move on to anything else, just wanted a little look at some of the ranging colours, because obviously your lavender blues are what you'd expect with them, but there are some smashing colours. So this is Sheena, and I think she's one of the loveliest of the pinks. So it's this real, well, quite an unusual, almost slightly dusky pink, but without so much purple in it. So some of them get an awful lot of purple through the pink, whereas I think Sheena picks up a rather nice shade to it.
With that yellow eye, that sort of pinky, the combination of colours is just so striking and cheerful, just happiness.
It is cheerful. It's the nice thing. I think they're all cheerful, even when you venture into the very, very darkness with them, which I only picked there we go. I only picked a little bit off this one because it wasn't out that much.
Wow, that really is dark.
Yeah.
More sultry.
Yeah, it's one called Thundercloud, and it does live up to its name. So it is extremely dark, very tall again. So we're into, well, probably 120 centimeters, so 4 footish, but it is a real smasher.
Yes, look at that up close. So stormy.
You're going to be fed up with this in a minute, right? I will.
You're in the right place to just endlessly show off wonderful Asters. Yeah. You are in the right company.
I don't know if he's going to come up so well, but this is Davy's True Blue. Oh. So most of the Asters, of course, are very got hints of lavender or lilac or purple coming through them. And I suppose this strictly also is purpley blue, but I think it's probably as close as you get to a proper blue. Aptly named, I feel, but again, quite nice and tall and late to flower. As you can see, it's only just coming out now, whereas things like Marie Ballard have been out since early September, so you're getting a bit of a range. I mean, you never get that long the flowering season out of this lot. You really have to move into something different. And before I shut up about them, or this lot, I promise there's plenty more Asters to come, but I did have to mention the purple reds, really. So this is Rufus. You get quite a few of this sort of shade of purple red through them. Rufus is probably one of the most mildew resistant because, of course, I can't really talk about them without mentioning the dreaded mildew, can we?
I was sitting here thinking, shall I ask?
Yeah, you do have to mention it. And then New York's, the novi-belgii are the ones that can get mildew. So it is something to watch out for. Again, it's usually when they've become very dry, they get stressed and then it becomes a lot worse. So if you can maintain a better level of moisture in the soil, you're going to have a head start on it. So that was part of the thing with mulching this spring as well. That really helped with us. And of course, not doing what we do, which is plant them all together. It might look amazing, but once if you get an outbreak, of course, it can then just run through the whole lot. So it is better typically mixed planting and good air movements, but that's not always a possibility, is it?
And also, I mean, you're right, the look en masse in your garden is sensational, and you are specialists, you know, you are famed for this plant. So if anyone's going to get away with mass planting of them, it's you.
We need to do it, but it might not be the most sensible thing in other people's gardens. But it is, I think also with the mildew, we sometimes have had to venture down using fungicide, but we try not to. We try to use natural products where possible. So garlic and seaweed works really well as a spray for the foliage. It just helps form a natural fungal colony on the leaves anyway, so there's no room for the mildew spores, which is kind of a good way to do it, I think, if you can.
That's clever.
Doesn't always work 100% though. Some years you're just going to be stuck with it, but
clever when it works.
So I had to also include my favourites, which is Melbourne Magnet, who again really good disease resistance. Fluffy quill double flowers, and then opening to show this really good big yellow center, and it just looks magnificent. It's got to be a winner.
So floriferous as well, just festooned with all of these dreamy flowers. You're right, they really are all so cheerful.
Yeah, they are. And even when you venture into the slightly smaller ones, so this is Dazzler, who looks like he should be tiny, but he actually grows to, again, sort of 90 centimeters, just under. But it's a fabulous head of flowers. So that's just picked off the one stem, obviously. It's so pleasing, because once you've got a big club going, you just get an absolute sheet of these flowers. It's lovely. It stands up well for the weather as well, because being a slightly lighter weight flower, you don't get the droopiness or damage in them. So should we have a look at a different sort?
Is that the Belgies?
Yeah, that's the Belgies.
Did you tell them about the range of height?
Oh, no. Okay, so I was going to bring in a little pot of Rosenwitchel, which is our shortest one. So Rosenwitchel's pink, as you might have guessed, but it's tiny. So she's only about 20 centimetres, something like that. And then, tiny. All the way up to things like Beauty of Colwall and Algar's Pride, where you're 150 to 180 centimetres. So there's a big range in the heights with them.
Are we moving on mostly because Ross can probably not fit any more in his hand? That is
probably, yes.
A great big bunch of asters. Right, so what's next then?
We'll stick with the theme of Aster. We do have a supporting cast of other things as well, but
well, I can see a few, sneaky things peeping over your shoulder that we'll move on to, but I'm enjoying the asters.
No, they're very good. Let's have I need that one. So what I wanted to talk about now are the European asters. So these are proper asters. So we've got no worries about names here. So it's Aster Mellis. And I'm hoping they're beginning to fade a little now, because of course they flower much earlier. You're in your rich purple blues and shades of lavender blue right the way through, really. You get the odd pink. Grunder, which is this one here, is probably the tallest. So that reaches up to about 3 feet, 90 centimeters. And it's magnificent. It's really good for cutting, because you get this whole long, straight stem with this lovely bunch of flowers on the top. And it lasts for ages and ages. But one of the very best we find, so our soil's quite heavy. So we're a heavy clay here. And the Astramelis don't like to sit too wet over winter. So this can be a bit of a problem with us. We have to find the best draining positions for them. And they also tend to prefer it a little bit more alkaline. But Thornset Flourish, which has the smaller flower, but it's a really good colour, and it flowers and flowers and flowers. It's little socks off about 60 centimetres, so just about the 2 foot mark, and doesn't seem to mind so much about the soil conditions, which...
Thornset Flourish was named after the village where I was born.
Oh, wow.
There we go. Perfect.
Norfolk. Yeah. There were 2 guys that had a nursery in Cheney Lane at Thornset St Mary, and they did.
There's something else as well that came from there.
Yeah, and it's an Achillea.
Ah, right. Okay.
The Achillea is called Thornset Fletton, which is named after the colour of a brick.
Right.
So it's a kind of terracotta colour.
Yeah, lovely.
Amazing. There we go.
So it's a much more open plant. You can much more open flower as well, much more starry. So you can see the difference between that and a Belgii.
Yes.
Quite different plant indeed. I like these a lot. They're really nice.
They've got, I suppose, a bit more of a natural, informal thing going on.
Yeah, they mix really well if you like using grasses and things like that in the borders as well. We're busy getting soaking wet because it rained rather a lot last night, so they're all really socky.
I did wonder this as I was getting ready for the podcast. I thought, I wonder if the plants are already picked and undercover, or if they're as wet as everything in my garden.
That would require being organised. They were rushing around this morning. It's 9 o'clock.
I think we had your rain late last night and early this morning. I mean, we've got blue skies here now, but when I got up this morning about 7 o'clock, it was so dull and dark and dreary and drippy and wet. It was horrible.
Yeah, it would definitely came in, I don't know, middle of last night sometime. I woke up and heard it and went, oh no. They're really wet tomorrow. But never mind. It was quite exciting in the garden though, because we were getting all the mist rising off the plants and things. So I wanted to just have a look at, I think maybe my favourite European Aster, but this does change from day to day, so might not guarantee it. But it's Pyrenees lutetia. So this was raised by Kayir Nurseries in 1912. But although it's always been sold as being Aster Pyrenees, so a straight species, we think it's probably not. It's very vigorous. It definitely seems more like it's probably a hybrid, but it doesn't matter. So flowers August and right the way through. You can see it's still throwing out new flower buds coming on the stems down here. So it'll keep going right to the end of October, really, won't it?
Yeah, until it really gets cold.
And it's very pale lilac, I suppose, but it's almost white. And particularly when you put it up against some of the darker colours, it takes on in the garden that real light sort of lilac-y, pinky. But it wants to get 2.5, just about 65 centimetres, except it's really lax, so it always flops out. I don't know if either of you've grown it, but I don't bother staking it in the garden. So it just has to flop out, and then you get growth in the middle of it. So it ends up making this lovely sort of mound effect. And I think it's a smashing plant.
Aster, I don't know whether you're going to show it or not, because I think it's probably a bit earlier, but Aster sedifolius. Now that flops like anything, and it always reminds me of a crumpled bed quilt.
It's beautiful though, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
I didn't pick any actually, but it's probably one of the ones that's been in longest constant cultivation in the UK is the sedifolius.
Yeah,
it's from the 1700s. So yeah, it's a lovely plant.
Lovely really sort of shade of blue, isn't it?
Yeah, and those tiny reflexed petals, so the centre sticks out. And it's one of the few, although it's not, I don't suppose you could call it really scented, not like a rose or something like that, but it has a lot of, I suppose it's a pollen scent, isn't it? It's a real sort of honey scent that comes off it, whereas most of the others, you don't get anything.
I love with this one that Rob's now holding, it's so sort of spiky because of those sparse petals. It gives this lovely haze of all the little sort of lilac spikes coming off the plant.
Proper stars, yes.
Yeah.
Admittedly, when it's drier, it's not quite as spiky.
Okay.
This is partly soggy Aster. But,
this is like when we bring snowdrops inside and they start to fly in the heat.
Yeah. You're like, that doesn't normally happen outside.
It doesn't look anything like this in the garden.
So I think I probably ought to mention, because I think we'd be missing out, wouldn't we, if we didn't mention Fricatii as well.
Yeah.
So Fricatii is a hybrid with Astramelis that we've looked at, and a Himalayan species called Thomsonii. And so you get the bigger in flowering season. So late July with us usually, right the way through into early November, unless we get a really heavy frost. Big lavender blue flowers. This is monk, but Wunderwon Staff is very similar. I always quite like that this hybrid cross between Amelis and Thomsonii was raised, first recorded in the UK in the late 1800s by a reverend whose name I cannot for the life of me remember at the moment, but he showed it at an RHS show and they said, oh, brilliant. Wrote it all down, recorded it properly, and then it was never to be seen again. So we don't know what happened to that, but it disappeared. And the hybrid cross wasn't made again until 1914 by a Swiss nurseryman called Fricat, hence the reason that it's now Aster cross Fricatio. His first 3 seedlings that he named was Monk, Eiger and Jungfrau, which was the 3 mountain peaks you could see from his nursery. Oh, that's nice. I quite like a nursery up a mountain.
Side of a hill's not good enough.
No, I need a mountain outside. And before we moved on, so this probably looks an awful lot like the Fricatio, just looking at the flowers. But if you look at the foliage, I don't know, Alan, do you grow this one, Peduncularis?
No, I don't.
No. Okay, so this is Aster peduncularis. Only gets to maybe 50 centimeters, something like that. And again, flowers late July, August,
forever,
right the way through. You can see on this one stem I've picked, you've got flowers that have long gone, and then you've got fresh, and you've got buds still waiting to come on. Really, really tough. So it will tolerate shade, light shade, drought, damp soil, pretty much anything you want to throw at it, and it just gets on with life. It's a really nice little plant. Always freaks me out in the spring when it comes up though, because the foliage is so densely hairy, it looks almost white, and you get sort of one shoot here and one shoot over there somewhere. You think, well, that's going to be useless. But
boom.
It just fills itself in and makes this lovely mound, and then you get the flowers coming up above it. So yeah, it's a smashing plant.
Very
isn't it?
good, yeah.
I think it's one of the things I like about asters is even when you're a new gardener, because they're so, well, certainly the ones I've grown, so keen and so easy to split, and they do so well out of it, that this is a really nice sort of beginner plant. I'm really have always been, because I'm not a proper gardener, all of the real gardener stuff of dividing and hacking back, I've never been very good at. I'm a timid gardener. But you can get away with it with asters. You can kind of experiment on them, and they're very kind to you when you're learning.
They're very forgiving on the whole, yes. They occasionally look a bit grumpy, and you think, well, maybe that wasn't the right thing to do, but they will usually pull through. Yeah. Yeah, definitely forgiving. I suppose, well, we're still in European and Asiatic. I wanted to just mention Nervius barharare. Not very exciting, I suppose, flower-wise, but as you can see, it's only just starting to flower now. And most years, unless it snows an awful lot, it's still out and ready for picking at Christmas time. So really, really late season. There is a rumour abounding, though, that they're about to change this over into Calameris. So it may not be an aster for much longer. We'll make the most of it while it is.
It's actually some of those old subspecies types. They're the kind of asters that are, I mean, they're terribly long-lived, aren't they? And, I mean, I remember seeing them in old neglected gardens years and years ago. I mean, they just carry on. Yeah,
they do. And certainly with the trinervius or trifoliatus types, they thrive on neglect. Ignore them completely, and they will do better and better. So yeah, no, it's well worth. It's well worth if you've got a slightly tougher spot which you're not too worried about, and want a bit of interest in them. And they're well worth thinking about.
Wash up your dustbin area.
Yeah, exactly.
Dare I ask what the difference is then between the little sort of Calameris purple daisies and an aster?
Something that a botanist decided. And I suppose if you look at the foliage, they are quite distinct. So you've got this rather dentate foliage instead of the nice smooth entire leaf that you get with most of the asters. And the flower does look a little different as well, but I expect it comes down to differences in florets and pairs and all sorts. I don't know is the strict answer there. I probably ought to. After all, I did train as a botanist, so I'm maybe very naughty.
I'm kind of glad you don't know. You know enough already.
Okay, small flowered, because we need the small flowered, particularly now we're in October and it's really their heyday. So this is possibly one of the best known out of the small flowered, which is Little Carlo. And it is a fabulous plant. So when it's doing well, 120 centimeters, sometimes a little bit less than that. This mass of lavender blue flowers, and it just goes on and on as well, doesn't it?
I know.
Yeah. Good levels of mildew resistance as well once you get into the small flowers. So not always 100%, because particularly something like Little Carlo, it's a Symphyotrichum, but it's a hybrid, so it's a cross with Cordifolium, which is things like chieftain, with a good dose of novi-belgii in there. Hence the reason why it can sometimes get mildew, but it's usually pretty good.
And is it when they're pollinated that the centres change colour?
Yeah, so once the bees have had a go at them, you'll get this colour change coming. It gradually happens with age sometimes on the flower as well, but the bees do speed it up. And I know I've had trouble before with judges who go, oh, isn't that a bit past us? I'm like, no, I just couldn't ban the bees. They wouldn't stop.
The great pollinator plants, the bees are absolutely all over them when it's warm enough. They really are.
Yeah, they're so beautiful, so floriferous.
Yeah, well, we had to go the next stage up as well. So down in flower size, but just the sheer volume of flower you get with some of these small flowers is amazing. So this is pink cloud. So it's, again, Symphyotrichum, but ericoides. So you've got, this shows up really, but little tiny pepper-like leaves, hence the ericoides. And then very dainty little flowers, but an absolute mass of them. And up to 90 centimetres at most, usually a little bit less than that. But a really fabulous plant.
It does look like clouds in the border.
Yeah. I mean, even on this video, it does look like a little puff of a cloud in the sky. Yeah, look at that. Or a little bit like Gyp.
I think
Yes.
it looks like a much more sort of butch gypsophila.
Yeah.
And actually they work, I find, so I quite like cutting them, and I do find with the small flower they work really well as a filler. So the same as you use with gypsophila, and then you can put your big showy stuff in between it. So, one of my all-time favorites, which is kind of like pink cloud, but much longer in the stem. So will stand up to 4 foot tall. Very, very pale, and it's rosy veil. So again, if you're thinking fillers and big displays, fabulous. Lasts for a long time in the garden as well.
You can see how tall the stem is. That's flowering.
Yeah.
Such a
Flowers on
bloom.
the top of it.
Yeah.
Bashed around the face by wet daisies all morning. It's like, oh, there's another one.
Probably a good idea you brought that one out towards the end of this particular bunch, because
Yeah,
it's quite unruly. It's unmanageable.
it is a bit unruly.
We're getting unrulier and unrulier.
Yeah. So we're sort of still within this, well, within what we might class as small flowered, although actually the flower's gone up in size. But this one's called Jessica Jones. So it's a Symphyotrichum pringlei hybrid. So you've got influence, well, similar to ericoides, I suppose, with fine foliage, but a little bit longer. And again, a bit more height. So we're easily up to 130 centimetres. And then this mass in October of these single, but very pretty flowers, aren't they?
Yeah.
I'm hoping the pink colour's coming through well enough. And this one, I don't know that we're ever going to be able to show this very well, but this is Symphyotrichum turbinellum, the prairie aster. So there we can see the flower.
It's so airy.
It's really light and airy, and only just starting to flower now.
Fantastic foliage as well, and
Yeah.
the dark stem.
So the foliage,
It's almost glaucous.
yeah, earlier in the season is much bluer green. It's now gone a bit darker, but it clasps around the stem.
When we get to some of the taller varieties, I'd like to ask if you do the Chelsea chop or the Hampton hack on them, because I've got one aster in the garden that is called Orpheus, which is black stems with very, very purple flowers.
I nearly picked that today.
Did you? Well, I planted it in an area where, I mean, it's going to be, I don't know, between 5 and 6 feet tall, probably. And I thought, oh gosh, I made a mistake here. What am I going to do? So I chopped it.
Yeah.
And I chopped it, and it's about just over a metre, and it's absolutely perfect. So do you do that with any of yours?
We don't, mainly because we like just to let them do what they want to do. We don't need to, but it's definitely a process of experimentation. So we have tried it on a few things. We sometimes find that it delays the flowering a little too much.
Yeah.
So some of the later flowering, of course, because it makes it slightly later, you're then pushing it really too far to get anything much out of it. And the only other ones to really watch with it are the double flowered forms. You can sometimes find that you lose some of the ray florets. So instead of getting your full double, you'll get a semi or even a single flower. But you know, if it's the wrong height, but you like where it is, give it a go. As we've already said, they're very forgiving. So it's always worth having an experiment. If it doesn't work that year, you're not going to have killed it. Just remember not to do it again the next year.
Well said.
It's funny with Orpheus, I think everybody in our friendship kind of group in the Norfolk, East Anglia pocket, we all grow it. Was it bred by Rosie Steele?
Yes, it occurred in her garden, actually. And then she very, very nearly got rid of it because it was so tall and unruly. And I was one of the lucky recipients to have a wheelbarrow full of this stuff, and it arrived and all the rest of it. And then I planted it and it flowered. And oh, thanks, Rosie. But it does successfully Chelsea chop. So it is, it works on that one anyway.
Yeah.
I agree with what Helen says about it being, you know, how you can lose some of the doubleness of some of the flowers. So, I mean, it's up to you. It's your choice whether you do it or not. But I would suggest as a gardener, do it on some of the ones that flower earlier rather than the later ones.
Yeah, and it's always worth, I think you have to be a little bit brave in gardening and just have an experiment and see what happens. I mean, as long as it's not anything too drastic, but certainly with stuff like the Chelsea chop, it's not going to do them any harm. And if you don't like the end result, well, you know what not to do. So it's always worth having a go at these things.
And talking of, you know, that seedling turning up in Rosie Steele's garden, with so many growing in your garden, do you get some interesting seedlings cropping up?
We do, yes. Actually, I've got one here. If I can get it out, everything's turned itself upside down as usual. So this is one of our more recent ones that we've named, which was a chance seedling that came up. We had to be a little bit careful. We try not to encourage too much seeding, otherwise you get in a terrible muddle. But occasionally these things happen. And then if we do think it's half decent, we select it out, and 3 to 4 years of growing it before we'd even consider giving it a name, because they do change in their habits and what they're doing, and also making sure that it's significantly different from something else and you're not just getting overexcited and then you look at it and you think, well, I can't really tell it apart from that one. So this is one called Maggie May. It's a Lavis hybrid, so it's quite a big, vigorous. It forms a nice big vigorous clump.
Nice open sprays.
But open sprays and a long flowering season as well, and really disease resistant and drought tolerant. So it ticks a lot of boxes for more modern gardening, I suppose.
Yeah, that is beautiful.
Yeah, it's we were really pleased with that one. So yes, we do. We try not to go crazy and name everything though.
You'd have a lot, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Hello. We can't hear you yet, but I'm sure we'll be able to hear you soon. It normally catches up.
Okay.
Oh, there we are.
Yay. Good.
Oh, you're looking very snug.
Yeah, not quite as cold as last time, but not far off.
Yeah, you were really bundled up last time.
Yeah.
Alan, you are a little in the dark, but I don't know if you can do anything about it. Oh, he's off. You guys are brilliantly lit. It's like you've got your own spotlight.
Yeah, it's just the natural light, but the sun's coming through the east, so we're getting a... Congratulations on the allotment, Thordis.
What your name?
Right, okay. This is Aster trinervius.
Sorry, Lily saw there was a nice Aster. She wanted to get involved.
Came to join. Our one was faffing around underneath us as well. Can I join in?